Guinea's stalled democratic transition, a critical analysis. Welcome to the Bold African Voice, BAV, where we bring you the latest news, in-depth analysis, and critical insights into the political landscape of Africa. I'm Abdul Karim Kargbo, born and raised in Africa. Today we delve into the ongoing political struggle in Guinea, where the military junta's delay in transitioning to democracy is raising questions about the future of the nation and the region. Stay tuned as we break down the complexities, compare Guinea's situation to other West African nations, and explore what needs to happen for true democratic change. In September 2021, Colonel Mamady Doumbouya led a military coup in Guinea, ousting then-President Alpha Condé, who had controversially amended the constitution to secure a third term. Initially, the junta garnered popular support for ending Condé's rule. However, subsequent delays in transitioning to civilian governance have led to widespread disillusionment and unrest, missed deadlines, and public discontent. In 2022, the junta agreed with the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, to initiate a democratic transition with elections scheduled for December 31, 2024. As the deadline passed without action, the junta announced plans for a constitutional referendum, without specifying a date, prompting protests, met with repression. Regional context: a pattern of military interventions. Guinea's situation mirrors a broader trend in West Africa, where military coups have become increasingly prevalent. Since 2020, at least a dozen coups d'états have occurred in West and Central Africa, with 8 proving successful. These events often stem from public dissatisfaction with corrupt civilian governments and a perceived failure to address security and economic challenges. Comparative analysis: Guinea and its neighbors. In Mali, the junta has faced similar challenges. After the 2021 coup, the military agreed to a transition plan but has since missed deadlines, leading to public protests and regional tensions. Similarly, in Niger, a 2023 coup led to the detention of President Mohamed Bazoum, with the junta facing international condemnation and internal unrest. The dangers of prolonged military rule. Extended military rule undermines democratic institutions and erodes public trust. In Guinea, the junta's failure to honor transition commitments has led to increased repression, including the dissolution of political parties and restrictions on independent media. Such actions stifle dissent and hinder the development of a vibrant civil society. Prospects for democratic transition. For Guinea to achieve a successful transition, the junta must adhere to its commitments, engage in transparent dialogue with opposition groups, and ensure the protection of human rights. International pressure, particularly from ECOWAS and the African Union, can play a pivotal role in encouraging the junta to fulfill its promises. However, the junta's recent actions suggest a reluctance to cede power, raising concerns about the future of democracy in Guinea. Guinea's stalled transition to democracy highlights the complexities and challenges of military-led governance in West Africa. While initial support for the junta was evident, the failure to meet transition deadlines and the suppression of dissent have led to public disillusionment. The experiences of neighboring countries underscore the importance of a clear, committed, and inclusive approach to democratic transition to prevent further instability and promote sustainable governance. Guinea's democratic transition faces setbacks amid regional turmoil. The role of ECOWAS in shaping Guinea's future. ECOWAS, as the regional political and economic bloc, plays a crucial role in influencing Guinea's political trajectory. The bloc has consistently called for a return to constitutional order in Guinea, particularly through the democratic transition plan negotiated after the coup. ECOWAS's pressure on the junta to fulfill its promises of elections and governance reform underscores its commitment to democracy in West Africa. However, the bloc has faced challenges in enforcing its sanctions and recommendations, especially when military regimes remain in power for extended periods. In the case of Guinea, ECOWAS has been somewhat constrained by the junta's apparent unwillingness to budge on its timeline for transition. The recent announcement of the constitutional referendum, without a fixed date, was perceived as another tactic to delay the restoration of democracy. Analysts argue that ECOWAS must adopt a more robust strategy to compel the junta to respect the agreed transition plan. This could involve not only diplomatic pressure but also stricter economic sanctions and potential military intervention, especially considering the bloc's past actions in countries like Mali and Burkina Faso. One of the challenges ECOWAS faces is the shifting political climate within its member states, many of which have seen similar military takeovers. Guinea, Mali, and Burkina Faso have demonstrated a growing trend of military leadership in the region, which diminishes the overall effectiveness of ECOWAS's influence. The junta-led governments of these nations are often more inclined to support one another, presenting a united front against external pressure. This regional solidarity among military regimes poses a dilemma for ECOWAS as it strives to maintain democratic standards in a region increasingly dominated by authoritarian leaders. Military governance, the Guinea model, and its risks. While military governments claim to restore order and stability, their prolonged stay in power often creates significant risks for both the immediate political environment and the long-term stability of the nation. Guinea, like Mali and other countries in the Sahel, demonstrates the precariousness of military governance. The junta may claim legitimacy by positioning itself as the protector of national interests, but its methods, often involving repression of opposition and limiting political freedoms, ultimately undermine the very democratic principles it is supposedly aiming to restore. The risk of radicalization grows under such authoritarian conditions. Young people who were initially hopeful about the coup to remove corrupt leadership may soon become disillusioned with the junta's inability to offer substantive reforms or tangible benefits. As the economy continues to struggle and social unrest rises, military rulers may face growing opposition, both from within the country and from external actors seeking a more stable democratic regime. The harsh response to protests, media crackdowns, and the suppression of civil society groups are all indicators of the junta's reluctance to relinquish power. Moreover, the economic landscape of Guinea has suffered because of this prolonged military rule. Guinea's economic recovery, once viewed as a potential success story due to its rich natural resources, has been hampered by political instability and the junta's failure to attract international investment. The military leadership has also struggled to address the pressing issues of unemployment, poverty, and infrastructure development, which were key factors contributing to the popular discontent that led to the coup in the first place. The role of the international community and civil society. The international community, particularly multilateral institutions like the United Nations, the African Union, and ECOWAS, has expressed concern over Guinea's prolonged military rule. While these bodies have imposed sanctions and attempted diplomatic measures, the impact has been limited. The junta has largely ignored international pressure, with some member states choosing to distance themselves from the issue to maintain favorable relations with the current government. The African Union, for instance, has faced criticism for its ineffective response to the rise of military-led governments in the region. Civil society in Guinea remains one of the most critical forces for pushing back against the junta. Despite heavy repression, Guinean activists and opposition groups continue to advocate for a return to civilian rule. These groups are pivotal in holding the junta accountable, organizing protests, and engaging in dialogue with international organizations to amplify their demands. However, the fear of violent reprisal and the absence of unified opposition have made it difficult to mount an effective resistance to military rule. The continued resistance from civil society groups also speaks to the broader struggle for freedom in the region. Guinea's political crisis is not isolated. It reflects the larger trend across West Africa, where the expansion of authoritarian regimes and the erosion of democratic institutions threaten the future of governance on the continent. Moving forward, a path to stability or more instability. Looking ahead, Guinea's path remains uncertain. There are two potential scenarios. Either the junta finally adheres to its transition timetable, leading to a return to civilian rule by 2025, or the military continues to consolidate power, effectively transforming into another entrenched autocracy in the region. The next few years will be critical in determining which direction Guinea takes. If the junta decides to respect the transition and hold free and fair elections, it could serve as a model for other nations in the region, proving that military interventions can be temporary and lead to democratic renewal. However, the risk of prolonged military rule remains high, particularly if the junta's grip on power grows stronger. In either case, regional and international actors will need to continue exerting pressure, while also preparing for the possibility that Guinea could remain in a cycle of military governance for the foreseeable future. As neighboring countries like Mali and Burkina Faso demonstrate, the international community's ability to effectively influence change is limited by the resolve of military juntas and the complex geopolitical dynamics in the Sahel. Guinea's future will depend not only on the decisions made by its leaders, but also on the collective response of its neighbors, regional organizations, and the global community. Guinea's struggle is one that reflects the broader challenges faced by many African nations as they navigate the complex path toward sustainable democracy. The world will be watching closely to see if Guinea can break free from the pattern of military rule and transition toward a more stable, democratic future, or whether it will remain caught in the cycle of authoritarianism that has plagued many parts of Africa in recent years. The influence of social media and youth mobilization. In the face of a repressive military government, social media and digital platforms have emerged as vital tools for both activism and dissent in Guinea. Social media, especially platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and WhatsApp, have provided a space for Guineans, particularly the youth, to organize, share information, and voice their frustrations with the junta. This digital mobilization has become a significant force, allowing young people to bypass traditional media censorship and reach a broader audience. However, this trend also presents a double-edged sword. While social media has enabled greater public participation in political discourse, it has also made it easier for the junta to target critics. The regime has cracked down on internet access and used surveillance tactics to monitor online activities. Activists and political opponents have been arrested, sometimes under accusations of spreading fake news or inciting violence, which further suppresses free expression. These actions suggest that the junta is increasingly anxious about losing control over public discourse, particularly as youth activism grows stronger. The role of youth in Guinea's political future is undeniable. Young people make up a significant portion of the population, and their engagement in the political process could determine the success or failure of the transition to democracy. However, this potential is stifled by the junta's reluctance to involve youth in governance and decision-making processes. Without meaningful participation and the creation of avenues for youth leadership, the current generation may remain disillusioned and disengaged from the formal political process, potentially leading to further instability. The economic ramifications of political instability. Political instability in Guinea, exacerbated by the junta's delay in transitioning to democracy, has significant economic ramifications. The country, rich in bauxite and other natural resources, has the potential for economic growth. Yet its political volatility has driven away foreign investments, particularly from Western countries. International companies, wary of the unpredictable political environment, have hesitated to invest in Guinea's mining and energy sectors, which are critical to the country's economic prosperity. Additionally, Guinea's domestic economy has struggled to meet the needs of its population. Unemployment remains high, inflation continues to erode the purchasing power of citizens, and basic services like healthcare and education are often inadequate. The junta's failure to prioritize economic reforms or offer concrete plans for economic recovery has left most Guineans facing a precarious future. The military leadership, focused on consolidating power, has not made significant strides in addressing these economic challenges, and this neglect further fuels public discontent. Comparing Guinea's situation with that of Mali and Burkina Faso reveals a similar pattern of economic stagnation under military rule. While these countries also have significant natural resources, their economic growth has been stunted by political instability, the diversion of resources to security concerns, and the erosion of democratic institutions. In both Mali and Burkina Faso, military regimes have been unable to deliver on promises of economic development or social progress, which has led to widespread frustration among citizens. The role of civilian leadership in shaping Guinea's future. As Guinea's military junta maintains its hold on power, the question of civilian leadership becomes even more critical. While the junta has promised to restore civilian rule, there is growing concern that the transition could be led by figures with military ties, rather than a truly independent civilian government. One of the key challenges in Guinea's transition process is the creation of a civilian political class capable of leading the country forward. Guinea has a rich history of political opposition movements, but many of these groups have struggled to present a unified front. The political environment has often been fragmented, with rival factions fighting for dominance, leaving the space open for military leaders to manipulate the situation to their advantage. For Guinea to transition successfully to democracy, it is imperative that the country's opposition parties and civil society organizations can forge a cohesive and strategic alliance. This unity would not only challenge the military's control, but also present a credible alternative to the junta. Additionally, the international community must support this process by providing resources, expertise, and diplomatic pressure to encourage an inclusive and transparent transition. The experiences of other African nations undergoing similar transitions offer valuable lessons. In countries like Tunisia, where a successful transition from authoritarian rule to democracy was achieved, the role of an inclusive civilian leadership, with strong support from civil society, was pivotal. However, Tunisia's success was not without its own challenges, including economic struggles and occasional political backsliding. Guinea can learn from such experiences by fostering broad-based political coalitions, ensuring that the transition process involves not just political elites but also ordinary citizens, regional dynamics, and the geopolitical influence. Guinea's political trajectory also has regional implications, particularly in West Africa. The growing number of military coups across the region, coupled with the lack of a clear transition plan in Guinea, has raised alarms about the potential for further instability. Countries such as Mali, Burkina Faso, and Chad have seen a resurgence of military leadership, often justified by claims of counterterrorism efforts and anti-corruption measures. However, these justifications mask the deeper issues of power consolidation and the erosion of democratic values. The involvement of foreign actors in Guinea's political future will be crucial. Countries like France, the United States, and China, which have economic and strategic interests in West Africa, will need to navigate a delicate balance between promoting democracy and securing their own geopolitical interests. These powers must be cautious not to inadvertently reinforce authoritarianism by prioritizing their own strategic goals over the people's demands for democratic governance. Moreover, regional organizations like ECOWAS and the African Union must step up their efforts to hold military governments accountable. The current political climate in West Africa requires a strong, coordinated response to prevent the further spread of authoritarianism. The stakes are high, as the future of democracy in the region hinges on the ability of these organizations to foster cooperation, enforce democratic principles, and support genuine transitions of power. Looking ahead, a long road to democracy. Guinea's political future remains uncertain, and the junta's refusal to adhere to the agreed-upon timeline for a return to civilian rule has raised serious concerns. While the initial support for the military coup has waned, the junta's prolonged grip on power has deepened the country's political and economic challenges. Guinea's path forward will require not only the commitment of its leaders to a peaceful transition, but also the active participation of civil society, the political opposition, and international actors. West Africa stands at a crossroads, with military rule threatening to take hold in several countries. The outcome in Guinea will have a significant impact on the broader region's political landscape. Will Guinea defy the odds and return to democracy, or will it succumb to the same authoritarian traps that have ensnared its neighbors? The answer to this question will determine the country's future and potentially shape the fate of West Africa as a whole. The role of international support and accountability for Guinea to successfully transition to democracy, international support remains indispensable. While Guinea's domestic efforts to form an inclusive and representative government are crucial, the role of the international community, particularly multilateral organizations such as the United Nations, UN, the African Union, AU, and ECOWAS, cannot be understated. These organizations must adopt a more proactive stance to ensure that the junta respects its transition obligations and the will of the Guinean people. International pressure can take various forms, ranging from diplomatic engagement to sanctions. ECOWAS, as the principal regional organization, has demonstrated a willingness to impose sanctions on military regimes that deviate from their agreed-upon transition plans. However, as seen in Mali and Burkina Faso, sanctions have had limited success in reversing military-led governance. The key challenge for ECOWAS is to maintain a unified stance among its member states, many of which have their own internal challenges concerning military governance. The bloc's credibility in promoting democratic values hinges on its ability to hold the junta accountable while balancing diplomatic and economic considerations. The African Union, AU, in its role as a Pan-African institution, must also step up to the plate. Despite its legal framework for handling unconstitutional changes of government, the AU has often been criticized for its inaction or weak responses to coups. Guinea's situation presents an opportunity for the AU to redefine its role in promoting democratic transitions in Africa. By providing a stronger voice for civil society and encouraging a bottom-up approach to governance, the AU can help cultivate a more inclusive environment that fosters trust in the transition process. However, the AU must also collaborate with international partners to ensure that Guinea's transition is transparent, fair, and inclusive. Furthermore, countries with economic and strategic interests in Guinea, including former colonial power France, the United States, and China, must avoid contributing to the country's political stagnation. These nations should prioritize diplomatic solutions, offering economic support contingent upon Guinea's adherence to democratic principles. In particular, the EU and Western powers must engage in constructive dialogue with ECOWAS and the AU to ensure their support for a credible and timely return to civilian rule. The impact of Guinea's transition on regional stability. Guinea's political transition is pivotal not only for its citizens, but for the broader stability of West Africa. The growing prevalence of military rule in countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger has created a domino effect across the region. Guinea, as one of the largest and most resource-rich countries in West Africa, is positioned at a crossroads. Its trajectory, whether it opts for democracy or continues down the path of military rule, will have a profound impact on neighboring countries. If Guinea successfully navigates a peaceful and inclusive transition, it could serve as a beacon of hope for other countries in the region. A return to civilian rule in Guinea would demonstrate that military coups are not an inevitable solution to governance challenges, and that transitions to democracy, although difficult, are possible. This could inspire political reforms and encourage peaceful governance models in other West African nations, particularly those grappling with insurgencies and instability. On the other hand, if Guinea remains under military rule for an extended period, it could signal the entrenchment of military governance in West Africa. The implications would be far-reaching, potentially normalizing military takeovers as legitimate forms of governance. Such a scenario could inspire other military factions across the continent to follow suit, undermining years of progress made in promoting democracy and good governance. The future stability of the entire West African region depends on the political will to counter this trend of military rule. The role of Guinea's youth in shaping its future. Guinea's youth will be a critical force in shaping the nation's future. The youth population in Guinea is substantial, with young people comprising a significant portion of the electorate and the workforce. Their role in Guinea's transition to democracy cannot be overstated. Despite the challenges posed by repression and political uncertainty, many Guinean youths have been vocal in advocating for political reform, social justice, and the restoration of civilian governance. The junta's failure to incorporate youth into the political process is a critical misstep. A successful transition to democracy will require the active participation of young people, not only in the electoral process, but also in the creation of democratic institutions. Youth-led movements can serve as powerful catalysts for change, mobilizing grassroots support for democratic reforms. They can also advocate for transparency, accountability, and justice in the transition process. However, to realize their full potential, Guinea's youth need platforms for expression and engagement. This means ensuring that political space is opened up for youth organizations and activists to contribute to the country's political discourse. The junta's unwillingness to engage with the youth may ultimately backfire as the younger generation increasingly looks toward alternatives to military rule. This growing frustration among youth could translate into greater instability as young people demand their right to shape their country's future. The role of youth movements in Guinea is reminiscent of broader trends across Africa, where young people have become instrumental in pushing for democratic reforms. In countries like Sudan and Zimbabwe, youth movements have played a key role in challenging authoritarian regimes, demonstrating that young people, when united, can bring about significant political change. Guinea's youth, with their growing awareness of their political rights, could become the driving force behind a successful democratic transition if given the proper support. Guinea's place in the broader African context. Guinea's political crisis, though deeply troubling, is not unique. Across Africa, many nations are grappling with issues related to democratic governance, military rule, corruption, and human rights abuse. The political instability in Guinea is part of a larger continent-wide struggle to build stable, democratic societies that can withstand the pressures of global economic competition, environmental challenges, and internal divisions. In East Africa, countries like Ethiopia and Somalia have faced their own challenges with military governance, insurgency, and the struggle for national unity. Similarly, Central Africa has witnessed numerous military interventions, with countries like the Central African Republic and Chad dealing with ongoing conflicts and power struggles. Guinea's situation, while rooted in its own specific historical and political context, shares many similarities with these regional crises. The lessons learned from these countries can provide valuable insights into how Guinea can navigate its own transition. It is crucial that African leaders and regional organizations take a more active role in helping Guinea break free from the cycle of military rule. By strengthening regional cooperation and ensuring that transitions to democracy are supported by both local and international actors, Guinea has the potential to chart a new course. However, this will require sustained pressure from the international community and a renewed commitment to democracy within Guinea itself. As Guinea looks to the future, the nation stands at a crossroads. The path it chooses toward democracy or continued military rule will shape not only its own destiny, but the broader fate of West Africa. The stakes are high, and the time for decisive action is now. The economic consequences of stagnation. As Guinea's political uncertainty deepens, the economic consequences become increasingly evident. Guinea's economy, which is rich in natural resources such as bauxite, gold, and diamonds, has the potential to be a cornerstone of economic growth in West Africa. However, political instability and the junta's failure to prioritize essential economic reforms have dampened the prospects of utilizing these resources to their full potential. International investors are hesitant to engage in the Guinean market, especially as the country continues to face political turbulence and an unclear path to democratic governance. The junta's tight control over the economy, combined with its inability to create conditions conducive to growth, has resulted in a stunted economy. Basic infrastructure projects remain stagnant, and essential services such as healthcare, education, and clean water are often underfunded. Additionally, youth unemployment remains one of the country's most pressing issues. The promise of economic recovery under a civilian government remains distant, and the longer the junta holds power, the the further Guinea strays from its potential to become a thriving economy in the region. When comparing Guinea to neighboring countries such as Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana, it is evident that stable political leadership plays a pivotal role in fostering a thriving economy. Both countries have experienced periods of political turmoil, but have since seen significant economic development due to effective governance and investment in infrastructure. In contrast, Guinea's military regime has failed to produce any tangible benefits for the average citizen, which deepens frustration and further undermines the legitimacy of the junta. For Guinea to achieve long-term economic stability, it must first secure political stability. This can only be achieved through a genuine transition to democracy, which requires that the junta cede power to civilian leadership. Only with a stable and transparent political system can Guinea attract the international investment needed to capitalize on its natural resources and improve the living conditions of its citizens. Civil society's role in building a post-junta Guinea. A successful transition to democracy in Guinea hinges on the role of civil society organizations, CSOs, and grassroots movements. These organizations have long been at the forefront of advocating for human rights, freedom of speech, and democracy in Guinea. Despite facing repression, CSOs continue to push for greater accountability from the junta and the restoration of civilian rule. Their work is crucial in maintaining a semblance of political discourse and pushing back against the military's authoritarian tendencies. One of the key challenges faced by CSOs in Guinea is the lack of a unified opposition. The country's political landscape is fragmented, with various opposition groups vying for influence and leadership. This disunity has prevented the creation of a cohesive political force capable of challenging the junta effectively. However, there are signs of increasing cooperation among opposition parties and civil society groups, which could lead to a more coordinated effort to demand democratic reforms. The role of independent media is also crucial in this regard. The junta has consistently sought to stifle independent journalism and restrict access to information. In the absence of a free press, many Guineans have turned to social media and alternative platforms to stay informed about political developments. The growth of digital media offers an opportunity for civil society to circumvent traditional state-controlled media and engage with a broader audience. For the country to transition successfully, it is imperative that the media is allowed to function freely without fear of censorship or retribution. Furthermore, the involvement of international partners in supporting civil society's efforts is essential. The international community can provide both moral and financial support to CSOs and grassroots organizations that are working toward a democratic transition. This support should not only come in the form of funding, but also through technical expertise and diplomatic backing. As seen in other African countries, international solidarity with civil society movements can serve as a critical lever in pushing back against authoritarian rule. Security concerns and the junta's grip on power. Guinea's security situation is another significant factor that complicates the transition to democracy. Although the junta came to power promising to restore order and security, the political turmoil has created an environment of instability, which has been exacerbated by violence and clashes between security forces and civilians. Protests against the junta have been met with violent crackdowns, and many human rights organizations have raised concerns about extrajudicial killings, arbitrary detentions, and widespread repression. The junta has maintained its grip on power partly using force, relying on the military and security services to suppress dissent and control key areas of the country. While the junta justifies these actions as necessary for maintaining national security, the ongoing repression is stifling the democratic process. The more the junta relies on military force, the further it alienates the population and damages the country's long-term prospects for peace and stability. The growing tension between the junta and opposition forces also poses risks to national security. As opposition groups continue to push for a return to civilian rule, the possibility of civil unrest and armed conflict increases. In countries where military rule has persisted for long periods, such as Sudan and Zimbabwe, Prolonged repression often leads to entrenched political and social divisions that become difficult to resolve through peaceful means. For Guinea to move forward, security sector reform will be critical. The military's role in governance needs to be reduced, and the security forces must be brought under the control of a democratically elected government. This will require a comprehensive approach to security sector reform, including training, transparency, and accountability. Only by strengthening democratic institutions and creating a more inclusive security apparatus can Guinea hope to break the cycle of military dominance and create a lasting peace. The need for regional cooperation and support. Guinea's future does not rest solely on its own shoulders. The political crisis in Guinea is a regional issue that requires cooperation among neighboring countries and regional organizations. West Africa is struggling with the rise of military regimes, and the region's stability is increasingly at risk. The success or failure of Guinea's transition will have broader implications for the entire region. Regional organizations like ECOWAS have a critical role to play in guiding Guinea through this transition. ECOWAS has long been a proponent of democratic governance and has worked to support peaceful transitions in countries like Liberia and Sierra Leone. However, the organization's response to the recent wave of military coups has been less effective, and Guinea presents a new test for its commitment to democracy. ECOWAS must be proactive in engaging with Guinea's leaders, ensuring that the transition is not delayed further, and pushing for the restoration of civilian rule. At the same time, Guinea's neighbors, such as Côte d'Ivoire, Senegal, and Sierra Leone, must work together to ensure that the political instability in Guinea does not spill over into their own countries. While regional solidarity is important, it must also be coupled with a commitment to democratic values. The international community should offer diplomatic, economic, and technical support to Guinea's neighbors to ensure that they remain committed to democratic reforms and do not follow Guinea down the path of military rule. The success of Guinea's transition will depend largely on the ability of regional and international actors to support the country's civil society, hold the junta accountable, and push for reforms that will lead to a democratic and prosperous future. As Guinea faces a critical juncture, the broader African context will play a significant role in shaping the nation's trajectory. The road ahead is fraught with challenges, but with strong regional cooperation and international support, Guinea has the potential to chart a new path toward democracy and stability. The importance of a transparent and inclusive constitutional reform process. A critical aspect of Guinea's democratic transition is the process of constitutional reform. The junta's pledge to hold a constitutional referendum is an essential step toward re-establishing a legitimate governance framework. But its success hinges on ensuring that the process is transparent, inclusive, and free from manipulation. As it stands, the junta has failed to provide a clear and detailed roadmap for the referendum, leading to concerns about the authenticity of the process and the potential for further delays. For the referendum to be seen as legitimate, all relevant political parties, civil society organizations, and community groups must be actively involved in the drafting of the new constitution. This inclusive approach would not only foster public trust in the process, but also ensure that the resulting constitution reflects the diverse needs and aspirations of the Guinean people. It is also vital that the constitution guarantees fundamental freedoms, including freedom of speech, the press, and assembly, which are currently being undermined under the junta's rule. Drawing from the experiences of other African nations, Guinea can look to the process of constitutional reform in countries like South Africa and Kenya. In these countries, inclusive constitutional dialogues played a crucial role in ensuring national buy-in and preventing the perpetuation of authoritarian rule. The process in South Africa, for example, was a cornerstone of the country's transition from apartheid to democracy, providing a blueprint for the peaceful resolution of long-standing political and social divisions. Similarly, in Kenya, the 2010 constitution emerged from a process that incorporated a wide range of perspectives and addressed the concerns of marginalized communities. While Kenya's transition was not without its challenges, It set an example for how constitutional reform can be used as a tool for reconciliation and nation-building. Guinea must learn from these examples, ensuring that its constitutional reform process is both participatory and reflective of the will of its people. The role of education and civic engagement for Guinea. To ensure that its transition to democracy is sustainable, it is essential to invest in education and civic engagement. The military junta's failure to engage with the country's youth population and educate them on their political rights is one of the key reasons behind the rising disillusionment with the political process. Civic education can play a pivotal role in empowering the people to hold their leaders accountable and demand their right to participate in democratic processes. In many African countries, the lack of civic education has contributed to weak democratic institutions, as citizens often do not fully understand their rights or the importance of active political participation. By focusing on education and awareness, Guinea can foster a culture of informed citizenship, where voters understand the significance of their choices and are empowered to make decisions that align with their collective interests. Civic engagement also extends to the media. A free, independent media is critical in ensuring that the government remains accountable to the people. The junta has imposed strict controls on the press, stifling dissenting voices and preventing the flow of information. For Guinea to transition to democracy, it must restore the independence of the media and allow journalists to perform their duties without fear of retribution. The media can serve as a watchdog, holding the government accountable and amplifying the voices of the people. Youth involvement in governance is also crucial. While many young people in Guinea have been vocal in their opposition to the junta, they must be given the opportunity to lead in a democratic system. Encouraging youth participation in the political process is essential for building a long-lasting and effective democracy. In other African countries, youth movements have become a force for positive change. In countries like Tunisia and Egypt, young people were instrumental in driving political revolutions that eventually led to democratic reforms. Guinea's youth can be similarly impactful, but only if they are given the opportunity to contribute to the political process. The impact of regional and international cooperation on Guinea's stability. The political and economic stability of Guinea is not only important for its own citizens, but also for the entire West African region. Guinea's location at the heart of the region gives it a strategic role in shaping regional security dynamics, especially in the context of growing instability in neighboring countries. The junta's ability to stabilize the country will determine whether Guinea can contribute to regional peace and prosperity, or if it will become a source of further destabilization. West African nations are heavily interconnected, both politically and economically. The ongoing instability in Guinea has already had ripple effects on its neighbors, particularly in terms of trade and security. The influx of refugees from Guinea due to political violence, economic hardships, and security concerns has placed a strain on the resources of neighboring countries such as Liberia and Sierra Leone. If Guinea continues to be mired in political crisis, it could lead to a destabilizing effect across the entire sub-region. This is where regional cooperation becomes crucial. ECOWAS, as the primary regional body, must remain engaged in Guinea's transition process, but it must also work closely with the African Union and the international community to offer technical and diplomatic support. Regional collaboration is vital not just for promoting democracy, but also for addressing the broader challenges of economic development and security. Guinea's future is intertwined with the stability of its neighbors, and it is in the best interest of the entire region for Guinea to achieve a successful transition to civilian rule. Regional powers like Côte d'Ivoire, Senegal, and Ghana, who have navigated their own transitions to democracy, must offer support, guidance, and solidarity to Guinea in its quest for political stability. These countries, along with the support of international actors, have an opportunity to foster regional stability by ensuring Guinea's transition does not follow the same path of prolonged military rule seen elsewhere in West Africa. The need for justice and accountability in Guinea. As Guinea moves toward a more democratic future, the issue of justice and accountability must also be addressed. The junta's rise to power was marked by the overthrow of an elected president, Alpha Condé, who had himself been accused of manipulating the constitution for personal gain. However, the junta has not yet taken meaningful steps to address the human rights abuses committed during Condé's presidency, nor has it held itself accountable for the violence and repression that have taken place since it took power. Accountability is a critical component of any successful democratic transition. Without justice for past abuses, Guinea risks perpetuating cycles of impunity that undermine the rule of law and foster political instability. The creation of a transitional justice process, which could involve truth commissions, reparations for victims of political violence, and trials for those responsible for serious human rights violations, would be a necessary step toward healing and reconciliation. Regional bodies such as ECOWAS and the African Union, along with international partners, should provide support for a process that ensures justice for the victims of both the Condé administration and the Junta. This would also signal to the Guinean people that their voices matter and that there will be consequences for those who abuse power. Only by addressing past injustices can Guinea begin to rebuild the trust between the government and the people, which is crucial for establishing a stable, democratic future. As Guinea grapples with its political crisis, the need for justice, accountability, and reform remains paramount. The decisions made today will shape the future of the country and its role in West Africa for generations to come. The role of international financial support in Guinea's transition. Guinea's transition to democracy will require more than just political and security reforms. It will also necessitate significant economic support. The country's economic outlook remains bleak due to its political instability, and while it possesses vast natural resources, such as bauxite, gold, and diamonds, the economy has suffered from underdevelopment and the absence of meaningful reforms under military rule. For Guinea to recover economically and lay a foundation for a democratic future, international financial institutions and donor countries must step up and provide targeted assistance. One of the first priorities for international financial support should be addressing Guinea's basic infrastructure needs. Much of the country's infrastructure, including roads, hospitals, schools, and electricity, is in poor condition. To foster stability and trust among the population, the junta or any subsequent civilian government must invest in essential services that will improve the daily lives of ordinary Guineans. Economic recovery can only be sustainable if it is accompanied by tangible improvements in education, healthcare, and public utilities. International financial institutions such as the International Monetary Fund, IMF, the World Bank, and the African Development Bank, AFDB, should play an active role in supporting Guinea's economic recovery by providing loans, grants, and technical expertise. However, these institutions must ensure that their support is tied to tangible progress in Guinea's political transition. It is not enough to simply provide financial assistance. The international community must demand accountability, transparency, and the creation of an inclusive and sustainable economic system. It will also be important for Guinea to re-enter global trade and investment markets. As the political situation stabilizes, the country can begin to attract foreign direct investment, particularly in sectors such as mining, agriculture, and energy. However, the junta's failure to provide a clear roadmap for democratic transition has led to a decrease in investor confidence, especially from Western companies. Restoring confidence in Guinea's governance systems and offering a clear, stable legal and business environment will be key in attracting foreign investment and driving economic growth. The successful economic transition will also hinge on Guinea's ability to diversify its economy. Currently, the country remains heavily dependent on the mining sector, which leaves it vulnerable to fluctuations in global commodity prices. Developing other sectors, such as agriculture, tourism, and manufacturing, will be essential for creating jobs and reducing the country's reliance on natural resources. Additionally, building a strong middle class and reducing income inequality will play a crucial role in ensuring that Guinea's economic recovery benefits all segments of society, particularly those who have been marginalized. The challenge of national reconciliation and building trust. National reconciliation will be an essential component of Guinea's transition. The political and social divisions that have deepened over the years, especially during the reign of Alpha Condé and the subsequent military junta, will require a concerted effort to heal. The country has been plagued by a legacy of political violence, ethnic tension, and historical grievances, all of which need to be addressed to build a unified, peaceful society. Without a robust reconciliation process, Guinea risks the perpetuation of conflict and division, hindering progress toward democracy. A National Truth and Reconciliation Commission could serve as a means for Guineans to confront the injustices of the past. This commission should involve a wide array of stakeholders, including representatives from different ethnic groups, political parties, civil society organizations, and the military. The process must be inclusive, ensuring that all voices are heard, particularly those of victims of political violence. Furthermore, the Commission should be independent and free from political interference, with the power to investigate abuses by all parties, including the military junta. A key part of the reconciliation process will be ensuring justice for victims of violence, both under the rule of Alpha Condé and the current junta. While the junta has not yet been held accountable for its role in the repression of protests and political opposition, the pursuit of justice must not be postponed. Accountability for past atrocities will be crucial to restoring public trust in the political process and to prevent future violence. However, the process should not focus solely on punitive measures, but also emphasize healing, restitution, and the rebuilding of relationships between Guineans who have been divided by years of conflict and political strife. To ensure the success of reconciliation efforts, the military must also play a role in restoring trust. The military's influence in Guinea has been significant, and it will be important for the armed forces to demonstrate their commitment to civilian rule and democratic principles. A transparent process of demilitarizing politics and reinforcing the role of civilian institutions will help in achieving the stability necessary for long-term peace. The military must be held accountable for its actions, but also engaged in the broader process of national healing. The importance of regional leadership in supporting Guinea's transition. While Guinea's future lies in the hands of its own people, the regional context will be crucial in determining whether the country can successfully transition to democracy. West Africa is a region that has experienced frequent coups and military takeovers in recent years, creating an environment where military regimes often enjoy solidarity with one another. Regional actors, particularly ECOWAS and the African Union, must work together to ensure that Guinea's transition is both supported and monitored, while also making clear that further delays in the transition process will not be tolerated. ECOWAS must continue to be a driving force in Guinea's political transformation. Although the regional body has been criticized for its often toothless responses to military takeovers in West Africa, it must now step up its efforts to bring the junta into account. The credibility of ECOWAS is on the line as Guinea's political future remains uncertain. ECOWAS must exert diplomatic and economic pressure to ensure that the transition plan is adhered to and that Guinea returns to democratic governance by the 2025 deadline. At the same time, the African Union must play an active role in shaping Guinea's political future. With many African countries facing similar challenges regarding military rule, the AU should take a more active stance in promoting democracy across the continent. The AU's role is particularly critical in helping Guinea's transition to a civilian-led government, as it can provide not only diplomatic support, but also mobilize resources for national reconciliation and democratization efforts. Guinea's stability is directly tied to the overall peace and security of West Africa. If Guinea remains politically unstable, it risks exacerbating the security challenges already faced by its neighbors. ECOWAS and the AU must be proactive in fostering peace and stability within the region, ensuring that Guinea's return to democracy serves as a model for other countries in West Africa. Regional collaboration will be key in preventing further political fragmentation and ensuring that military rule does not become a lasting norm across the continent. A crucial moment for Guinea's future. Guinea stands at a crossroads. The country's transition from military rule to democracy will determine not only its future, but the political trajectory of the broader West African region. The success of Guinea's transition depends on the commitment of both its political leaders and civil society to the principles of democracy, justice, and reconciliation. While the path ahead is fraught with challenges, the potential for Guinea to overcome its political crisis and emerge as a stable democracy remains within reach. International and regional support will be crucial in helping Guinea navigate its transition. Through collective efforts, Guinea can restore confidence in its political institutions, heal the wounds of its past, and build a more inclusive, prosperous future. The road to democracy may be long and difficult, but it is a road worth traveling, both for the people of Guinea and for the future of democracy in West Africa. The world is watching, and Guinea's success or failure will have a lasting impact on the region's stability and democratic progress. The role of the private sector in Guinea's recovery. While political stability and international support are key drivers of Guinea's transition to democracy, the private sector must also play a crucial role in the country's recovery and long-term growth. Guinea's vast natural resources provide a significant opportunity for economic development, but the country's political instability has deterred much-needed investment. For the country to rebuild its economy, the private sector must be revitalized, and policies must be put in place to foster a business-friendly environment. One of the first steps toward engaging the private sector is creating a stable legal framework that guarantees property rights, enforces contracts, and ensures the rule of law. Without a functioning legal system and predictable business environment, investors will continue to be wary of committing capital to Guinea. The Junta, or any future civilian government, must prioritize strengthening institutions such as an independent judiciary, regulatory agencies, and anti-corruption bodies to instill confidence in both local and foreign investors. Additionally, Guinea's mining sector, which has the potential to drive economic growth, must be developed with a focus on sustainable practices and equitable wealth distribution. While Guinea is home to some of the world's largest bauxite reserves, the benefits of these resources have not been equitably shared with the population. Corruption, lack of oversight, and insufficient reinvestment in local communities have left many Guineans impoverished despite the country's vast mineral wealth. For the private sector to thrive in Guinea, reforms must be implemented that not only promote investment, but also ensure that the local population benefits from economic growth. Public-private partnerships could be a way to channel investment into key sectors such as infrastructure, education, and healthcare. The development of infrastructure will be particularly crucial for creating a conducive environment for business, attracting investment, and facilitating trade. The importance of strengthening civilian institutions. For Guinea's transition to be successful, strengthening civilian institutions is essential. The role of a functioning government with transparent and accountable institutions cannot be overstated. In many African countries, military juntas have historically sought to centralize power, curtailing the authority and autonomy of civilian institutions. In Guinea, where the military has long played a dominant role, the restoration of civilian governance requires a comprehensive overhaul of public institutions. The key to a successful democratic transition will be the development of strong, independent institutions capable of holding the government accountable. This includes strengthening electoral bodies, the judiciary, and the public service. Independent electoral commissions, free from political interference, are essential for organizing credible elections. Guinea's electoral system must be reformed to ensure fair representation of all political factions, enabling citizens to choose their leaders freely and without coercion. Similarly, the judicial system must be independent and transparent. The protection of human rights, fair trials, and access to justice for all citizens is fundamental to the functioning of a democracy. Guinea's judiciary, under the junta, has been undermined by political interference, with judges and prosecutors often acting in the interests of the military leadership. Restoring the independence of the judiciary will be a crucial step in ensuring that justice is served and that corruption is curbed. Another area that requires significant attention is the public service. A well-functioning civil service is essential for the delivery of basic services to citizens. The capacity of government agencies to manage public resources, deliver education and healthcare, and maintain infrastructure will be critical for rebuilding public trust and fostering long-term development. Public service reforms must focus on merit-based recruitment, fair compensation, and professional training to ensure that government employees are equipped to serve the needs of the people. Addressing Guinea's security sector and demilitarization. A successful transition to democracy in Guinea also hinges on addressing the role of the military in national governance. The military has been at the center of political power in Guinea for decades, and its influence over civilian affairs must be reduced to ensure a genuine democratic transition. Demilitarizing politics will be one of the toughest challenges for the country, given the entrenched role of the armed forces in governance. One way to start the process of demilitarization is through a comprehensive security sector reform, SSR program. SSR focuses on restructuring and professionalizing the military and police forces while ensuring that these institutions are accountable to civilian authorities. Guinea's military, like those of other African countries, is often viewed with suspicion by the public due to its history of human rights abuses, political interference, and lack of accountability. The reform process must ensure that the military no longer operates as a political entity, but is instead focused on its core role of defending the nation. This would involve reducing the military's involvement in political decision-making, particularly in areas such as defense and foreign policy. The military's role should be clearly defined, and its activities should be subject to oversight by elected representatives of the people. Additionally, a crucial component of SSR is the promotion of civilian control over the military. The civilian government must have full authority over defense and security policies, and the military must adhere to the principles of democratic governance. To this end, professional military education and training should emphasize respect for human rights, the rule of law, and the importance of civilian oversight. Reforming the security sector is not only about reducing the military's influence in politics, but also about improving the security forces' ability to protect and serve the population. Police reform is equally important, as many Guineans suffer from the abusive practices of law enforcement. Creating a more accountable and professional security sector will help rebuild trust between the government and the people, which is essential for the success of Guinea's transition to democracy. The role of regional and international stakeholders in supporting Guinea's security sector reform. Guinea's security sector reform will require support from regional and international stakeholders, including ECOWAS, the African Union, the United Nations, and Western governments. These entities can provide technical assistance, resources, and expertise to help Guinea navigate the complex process of security sector reform. Regional organizations can facilitate dialogue and cooperation between Guinea's military leadership and its civilian institutions. ECOWAS has experience in supporting security sector reform in other West African countries, including Liberia and Sierra Leone, where similar reforms were necessary after years of civil conflict and military rule. The involvement of ECOWAS, the African Union, and the international community will be critical in ensuring that the security forces in Guinea are reformed in a way that supports democratic governance and human rights. International partners can also assist Guinea in strengthening its capacity to address security challenges such as terrorism, organized crime, and armed groups operating in the region. While the military's role in national defense should be limited to its core duties, Guinea must still be able to address security threats effectively. Training and equipping the security forces to meet these challenges in a professional, accountable manner will be essential for safeguarding the country's peace and stability. Looking ahead, a difficult but essential journey. Guinea's transition to democracy will be a long and difficult journey, but it is one that is necessary for the country's future. While challenges remain, the opportunity for Guinea to emerge from this period of uncertainty and build a stronger, more democratic society is within reach. The involvement of civil society, the private sector, the international community, and regional partners will be crucial in ensuring that Guinea's transition is successful. At the heart of this process must be the will of the Guinean people. They have shown time and again their desire for a better future, one that is free from military rule, corruption, and repression. For Guinea to overcome its political crisis and emerge as a model for democratic transition in West Africa, it must build strong institutions, promote national reconciliation, and ensure that economic opportunities are accessible to all citizens. While the path ahead is fraught with challenges, Guinea has the potential to overcome its current crisis and achieve a democratic, prosperous future. The support of the international community, a commitment to justice and accountability, and the active participation of the Guinean people will be essential in realizing this vision. The world is watching, and the success of Guinea's transition could set a powerful example for other nations in West Africa and beyond that are grappling with similar struggles for democracy and governance. Advice to African leaders: prioritizing democratic stability and institutional integrity. Guinea's ongoing struggle serves as a sobering reminder for all African leaders about the critical importance of safeguarding democratic values and promoting inclusive governance. The political instability and economic challenges faced by Guinea underline the dangers of authoritarianism and military rule. As African countries work to strengthen their democracies, they must prioritize the protection of democratic institutions, respect for human rights, and the rule of law. Guinea's situation calls for immediate reflection on the broader lessons that can be applied across the continent. African leaders must understand that democracy is not just about holding elections, but about fostering an environment where political opposition is respected, civil society is protected, and citizens are empowered to engage in the political process without fear of retribution. The need for leaders to adhere to constitutional limits and avoid undermining the democratic process for personal or political gain cannot be overstated. Guinea's experience, where the junta took power after the manipulation of constitutional rules by former President Alpha Condé, highlights the long-term consequences of such actions. Leaders across the continent must also recognize that security is not merely about military strength. It is about creating a society in which people feel secure in their rights, their livelihoods, and their futures. Democratic transitions require thoughtful, patient work to build institutions that serve the public and are accountable to the people, not the elite or military institutions. Leaders should actively work to prevent the erosion of democratic norms, remain open to peaceful transitions of power, and create systems of government that allow for checks and balances. Furthermore, Africa's future stability lies in building economies that are not solely dependent on a few sectors, but are diverse and resilient. African leaders must work toward creating inclusive economic systems that ensure equitable distribution of wealth, particularly by providing opportunities for youth who represent the future of the continent. Empowering young people through education, access to jobs, and involvement in governance can prevent the rise of political instability and dissatisfaction. Finally, African leaders must foster regional solidarity, where countries cooperate on shared issues of governance, security, and development. By promoting democracy within their own borders, leaders can set a positive example for neighboring countries and contribute to regional stability and prosperity. Summary of key messages. 1. Democracy and governance. Guinea's transition challenges emphasize the need for leaders to honor democratic commitments and engage in peaceful transitions of power. The erosion of democratic norms undermines the legitimacy of governments and leads to prolonged instability. 2. Inclusive processes. Guinea's political transition process must be inclusive, involving all political parties, civil society, and communities. An inclusive approach fosters national unity, while exclusion can lead to alienation and instability. 3. Institutional reforms. Strengthening institutions such as the judiciary, security sector, and electoral commissions is essential for a successful democratic transition. These reforms must focus on accountability, transparency, and the protection of citizens' rights. 4. Economic recovery. Guinea must shift toward economic diversification and create an environment that fosters investment, job creation, and improved infrastructure. International financial support should be tied to progress in democratic reforms. 5. Security and reconciliation. The role of the military in Guinea's governance needs to be reduced through security sector reforms. The country also requires a national reconciliation process to heal divisions and build trust among its people. 6. Regional cooperation. Guinea's transition is not just a national issue, but a regional one. West Africa must work together to support Guinea's return to civilian rule and prevent the normalization of military governance across the continent. Closing thoughts. The situation in Guinea provides valuable lessons for Africa as a whole. The continent's future lies in its ability to foster inclusive governance, rebuild trust in institutions, and promote sustainable economic growth. While the challenges may seem overwhelming, Guinea's future success hinges on its ability to navigate the rocky terrain of political transition with the help of both its people and the international community. If Guinea can successfully transition to democracy, it will not only heal its own wounds, but also offer hope to other nations in West Africa and beyond, demonstrating that even the most difficult transitions are possible with a commitment to peace, justice, and the rule of law. For African leaders, the time has come to embrace true democratic governance, one that prioritizes the welfare of citizens, fosters inclusivity, and ensures accountability. The experience of Guinea should serve as both a cautionary tale and a call to action. Let us build systems of government that are strong, resilient, and capable of withstanding the pressures of time, change, and challenge, ensuring that democracy is not just a distant ideal, but a living reality for the people of Africa. Thank you for watching this episode of The Bold African Voice, BAV. If you found this analysis insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Join the conversation in the comments below. We want to hear your thoughts on Guinea's political future. And remember, together we can make a difference. Stay informed, stay bold.